Greetings and welcome back to the show, World War II Books, Where to Start. I'm your host, Admiral Ralph Waldo Christie, hanging out in Australia today. And in my previous video, I talked about submarines and the overall context of the Pacific War. Today, we're going to get down to the sub-drivers themselves, the men who did the sinkings. I'm going to wander back and forth through time here. I've got a lot to cover. I've got about 8 books here and a movie to talk about. So let's get right to it. First up, Submarine by Edward L. Beach. From 1953, Edward Beach, 1918 to 2002, was not in command of a sub during the war itself. He was an officer aboard Trigger and maybe a couple other subs. He rose to prominence post-war, being a naval aide to President Eisenhower, I believe. And in the 80s, he kind of became a talking head du jour about naval stuff on History Channel documentaries and other programs. You've probably seen him there if you've got any background to naval stuff in the war. So this is not specifically his memoir. That would be Salt and Steel, which I do not have. This is more kind of a survey. Aboard Trigger, interspersed with other chapters about Seawolf, Archerfish, Tang, Albacore, Guerilla, Harder, Tarante, maybe a couple others. And it's kind of told adventure style. It's not too serious, and it's not trying to give an overall arching overview of the submarine war, but just specifically each boat. So it hops back and forth with Trigger chapters interspersed with the other stuff. I've had this forever, and I read it way back when. It's still in print thanks to Blue Jacket Books. They're on the ball. They've got all his stuff still in print. I don't know that's that valuable to hunt down. It's going to be kind of told in that post-war, early Cold War style. Can't help that there. It's published in 53. And it's short and sweet. You might like it, you might not, but there it is. And then Guerilla Submarines by Edward Dissette and Hans Christian Adamson. He's from Denmark. He passed away in '69, according to the liner notes here. And Edward Dissette was asked to take over the project. Edward Dissette himself was a sub-driver in World War II. He had commanded USS Zero, or Cerro. I'm not quite sure of the pronunciation. USS Cerro, not a household name, not a famous boat, had a very quiet war. Maybe 2 sinkings of major ships and the usual sampans and whatnot. On top of that, with some guerrilla runs, I believe, to the Philippines. Somebody had to do the donkey work unglorified, and Cerro is one of those boats. Guerilla Submarines is going to discuss primarily the runs to the Philippines, in and out, getting people in, getting supplies in, getting people out. I read this way back in high school also, and I haven't touched it since. It didn't really thrill me then. It might be more interesting to me now. Of course, it is one of the infamous Bantams here. It's short and sweet also, not too deep. Doubt this one's in print, but you can hunt it down if you really, really want it. Next, coming forward in time a bit, Submarine Commander by Paul Schratz from 1988. I read this in the 80s or 90s. Can't quite remember which, and I haven't touched it since, but I got 1 or 2 memories of this book only. The phrase to describe the smell of the boat, the phrase they used was feets, farts, and fannies. And that stuck with me all these years. And also remember that this guy was dedicated to food like nobody's business. He's going to tell you about just about every meal he had aboard the sub in excessive detail. I don't need to know the menu from 1944. But he's got it memorized. He's going to tell you about it. Now, he has some post-war stuff too, so he takes it forward into the Cold War, almost to the end of the Cold War, I think. So that might be more value. I don't have any burning desire to read this again, and I believe this one's out of print. And unfortunately, if you see the blurb there, down there, Admiral Galantin, author of Take Her Deep. I don't have Take Her Deep. I forgot all about that memoir. I never picked it up. Shame on me.
Raising havoc along the Japanese lines of communications. American submarines have sunk 319 ships in the Pacific. On the conning tower, 6 flags, 6 vessels destroyed.
USS Sea Wolf. Gerald Frank, James Horan, and Joseph Melvin Eckberg from 46. Now, Joseph Eckberg was actually the crewman. He was a radio man first class, and the only enlisted man I have on the list today that did a memoir. Frank and Horan would be the ghostwriters. And it's kind of told, or introduced, I should say, in kind of the hokey style. We met this guy on board a train, and we noticed his decorations on his blouse, and we didn't know what the one was. It was a dolphin. So we had to ask the guy, what does that mean? And he tells him his story about being on the Sea Wolf. So it's kind of a hokey introduction, but once you get into it, it's fine. Again, kind of light and sweet here, not too reflective. Eckberg was rated man. He was a plank owner on Sea Wolf, so he was there from day one, and very devoted to the commander of the boat. Pre-war service, he'd been in boats for a while and really liked the lifestyle. He was married, was Atlantic based, but as tensions heated up, his boat got posted to the Pacific. He didn't see his wife for a few years. He told her, honey, don't worry, going to Pearl, but nothing's going to happen. And a few months later, they're at war. So, promises broken there. This is kind of a hoot at times. His onboard shenanigans with people they are transporting to the Philippines or getting out of, Java, whatever. And the little hoaxes and pranks they played on these landlubbers had no knowledge of submarines. So that's kind of funny. And then a couple major incidents that I recall from the book. He had tonsillitis on run back from a patrol to Australia, got dumped on shore, and tried to take him out, but they doped him up with morphine, but he had an allergic reaction to it. And it didn't go well. And he woke up a day or so later, said, how'd the operation go? And the nurse says, honey, you didn't have an operation. We got to do it again. And his reaction, I don't have the exact sentence memorized, but it's kind of crazy. Dog blood and brains juice, nurse. Brain juice. Is that a real phrase from the war? What does it mean? I don't know. It's crazy though. But so if he's allergic to the morphine, they have to give him a local instead. And in the 1940s Australian medical care, that meant swabbing a couple of cotton balls or whatever on sticks with cocaine and sticking it down your throat to numb your tonsils. And once you start drilling really good, we know you're numbed up. And then we take the pliers or whatever instruments they used. You're sitting upright in a chair, by the way. You're not even laying on a table. Stick this thing down your throat and rip your tonsils out while you're numbed up so you don't feel it. And then you really start drilling and bleeding. And then we'll wheel you out. Next patient, please. Wow. Is it great to be not born in that time? Reason number one. Medical care sucked. So it's a hoot in its own way. And of course, he got detached from the sub to new construction, I believe, or to a class, a training course for a different specialty or an upgrade on the radio stuff that he knew. So he missed the fateful patrol where Sea Wolf is sunk, probably by friendly fire. Not a good ending for Sea Wolf, but he lived to tell the tale. So that's worthwhile for, especially for an enlisted man's point of view. Now I have an audio here, obviously. I don't know if it's in print, paperback style, but you can hunt it down if you like. And hey, it's nothing wrong with audio. It's awesome.
This way with an endless series of launchings. At the time of Pearl Harbor, the fleet had 1,076 vessels, of which 380.
Next up, Wahoo by Richard H. O'Kane, Rear Admiral. Now this baby didn't come into being until 1987. And Richard O'Kane was the exec for Mushmorton on Wahoo after some initial adventures with the first skipper, Paul Kennedy, whom O'Kane thought just kind of like, or at least too scared, too cautious to be a sub commander. His approaches were cautious, his attacks were hesitant, his results were meager, and it was driving O'Kane crazy, trying to be a loyal executive officer and do his job on board the boat, but knowing that the boat could do more, the crew was trained to a higher degree than the results they were achieving, which were just about zero. So I forget the exact circumstances, but I think he kind of went around the chain of command, around his own captain, to talk to folks ashore and get Mushmorton assigned as a PCO to observe and maybe give a swift kick in the ass to Kennedy to get him to understand he needs to have better results. Not much improvement. Kennedy's detached, Mushmorton takes over. And then all hell breaks loose, right? Mushmorton's a terror. 17 ships or 19 ships, depending which statistical count you care to credit. And also involved in a rather infamous incident in 1943 when they sink a Japanese cargo ship on its way to an island. Survivors bobbing in the water, and Mushmorton's orders them to be machine gunned. Depending on which version of the story you read and believe, you've got Lockwood's, you've got Clay Blair's in silent service, and you've got O'Kane's. Several different things could have happened to trigger this. It was later determined that the men in the water, for the most part, were not Japanese troops. They were actually Indian POWs being transported to an island for slave labor. There's probably no way in the world that much more than O'Kane or anyone aboard the Wahoo could have known this. And so the slaughter ensues. It became a bit of an infamous whoopsie, or we're actually, we're doing a job killing the enemy in uniform, no matter where they are, no matter if they're helpless or not. Instead of, we can't take 85, 100 guys prisoner on a sub. So they're either going to swim to shore or they're going to die. If we risk them getting ashore, they could kill American troops. It's a conundrum. It's a wartime thing. And attach whatever moral leaning you want to it. It's a tough snap decision a commander has to make. And Morton chose to machine gun him. Or some of the guys in the water had guns and were firing on the Wahoo. Again, it depends on which version you believe or which is you think is most likely to have actually occurred. It's a tough one to come down on either side. I have no idea. I'll leave it at that. But O'Kane later in life believed that was what kept Morton from receiving the Medal of Honor after his death in action, which, his bravery and reckless courage and results he achieved from it probably merited the Medal of Honor. But that incident kind of blighted his record. So it's a good read. Thing is, O'Kane's very technical and precise. He's going to give you bearings, courses, time to target, range, bearing. It's all here, and I think there, if I remember right, there's some diagrams here too to help you out to picture what the attack angle was like. So it's kind of dry in that respect, but it's a good read. Okay, continuing on, we've got another audio here. Thunder Below by Admiral Eugene Flucky, another Medal of Honor recipient here. This is from 1992. Gene Flucky was of the foolhardy, reckless, brave type also. When he took over command of Barb, he had no doubt in his mind how he was going to conduct his war. Extremely reckless, total faith in the crew, high degree of training, all that. And he set a personal goal of at least 3 ships sunk per patrol. And, let's ratchet it up to 5. Why can't we do 5 per patrol every patrol? And he guaranteed that result one time to Lockwood, leaving Midway, and delivered on it. That's, faith in yourself. The first couple of patrols were sent to northern waters off Japan, where he struggled with the weather as much as anything else, but he made a virtue out of necessity, and his descriptions of the wild weather up there are really pretty cool. Not something for the faint-hearted to attempt to endure on the bridge of a sub. Once he gets going in good hunting grounds, he really lets it rip. And as war progresses and targets diminish, he finds a new role for subs in attacks on land targets with parts of his crew. They attacked a train trestle one night, setting demolition charges, and had it time for the thing to blow up when the train was approaching. That's pretty innovative for 1945. He also ran in on the surface into a protected anchorage with not enough room to dive the boat if he had to at night, reasoning that Japanese would be not as on alert at night in a protected anchorage, realizing there were minefields and that they had a good defensive position, and U.S. subs would not be likely to poke their noses in, not counting on Gene Flucky. He does it, and he makes a hell of a run for it. He has to run through some fishing boats that are out trawling for fish late at night to get clear enough water to dive. Got away with it. Extremely foolhardy and brave at the same time. He was not about to let a target go. If there's a downfall to this book, it's his excessive use of the phrase, splice the main brace. He believed in rewarding his crew for sinkings with beer. He snuck cases and cases of beer on board at Midway over and over again to reward them for a good combat action. I think there's a little bit too much reliance and reference to the use of this reward during the book. And I don't know whether he is really just gung-ho to tell you how much he appreciated his crew's efforts, or whether he's giving himself away as a bit of a raging alcoholic. It's hard to tell. When you reference it that many times, I think you're trying to tell somebody without telling them something. And so take that into account too. But it's a really good tale. Next up, we have Clear the Bridge by Richard H. O'Kane. And get this, there's a blurb there from Edward Beach, author of Run Silent, Run Deep. Keep that in mind. This was published in 77. This is quite a bit thicker, 467 pages, Band War book. There are very few illustrations in here, mostly maps. So they had to dim down the illustrations for the weight of the text here. O'Kane, again, Clear the Bridge. Now this is just about Tang. So after he was detached from Wahoo, he took over new construction, that being Miss Tang, and made her probably the most famous boat of the war, I would say. 24 ships sunk, I believe, something like that, something crazy. A victim of his own last torpedo fired in the Sea of Japan. It was a wild runner, and it came back and exploded in Tang's rear engine compartment, sank the boat in about 180 feet of water, 100 feet of water, something like that, in the Sea of Japan. Not a good situation. O'Kane was on the bridge, of course, with the lookouts and attack officers. So they're in the water, and you got the balance of the men in the boat. The rear compartments were sealed off. They're flooded. Those guys are dead. There, like 30 guys make it to the forward torpedo room where there's an escape hatch or escape mechanism. This is a Belau class, I believe. It had an escape trunk, so a few men could get in this thing at a time. You flood it, you release the men up, and there's a line that floats to the surface with a bobber that's supposed to follow the line up. There's smoke filling the boat from batteries being damaged, and the heat's increasing, and the men are disoriented and confused and baffled to some degree. Apparently, they're not practicing escape drill well. Or the officers that remained below were not really in command situation, giving definite orders. There were a lot of suggestions, and what do we do? We're not quite sure. Do we risk getting out? Do we not? They know that there's no rescue coming. It's either the Japanese depth charge them again, or they die of asphyxiation. But despite this urgency, with the confusion and the amount of fumes in the air, things get really uncertain. So only a few men make it through the escape trunk and out and up to the surface. Of course, 180 feet of water is a risky proposition too, because you got to partially decompress on your way up, or your lungs are going to explode, right? I think this happened to one of the guys. He was vomiting blood and in excruciating pain. I think the compression of the water got him. The men that did make it to the surface in Tang and O'Kane and his crew that had remained together somehow were picked up by a Japanese patrol boat where they're promptly abused and sent to a prison camp, Ofuna, and later Omori, of infamy. O'Kane does not focus hardly at all on the imprisonment or post-war stuff. He covers it in just a few pages. I don't think he's willing to really go through it again, recount it, or give the Japanese the satisfaction of recounting the humiliating and excruciating circumstances of his imprisonment. So while it's not a happy ending, he somehow did retain his composure and sanity and carry that stuff with you forever. And I read a blurb somewhere that late in life he contracted dementia and was walking around his house searching for the lost members of Tang. He was a Medal of Honor recipient, being awarded by President Truman himself at the White House after the war. So that's Clear the Bridge. Can't go wrong there. Highly recommend that one. And then to the book and the movie. Run Silent, Run Deep, Edward L. Beach. This is from 1955. I actually haven't read this. I was surprised the library, my library system is awesome. It still had one copy running around I think the 26 or 30 branches they've got all connected together in my area. So I don't know how time to take a gander at it or not, but I got that out because I primarily as a companion to the movie. Clark Gable, Burt Lancaster from 58, using the actual submarine USS Redfish to film a lot of the scenes. And for rivet counting of the naval sort, man, it's phenomenal. You can't beat it. They're on board. It's real. They're going from compartment to compartment. It's real. They're in the conning tower. It's real. They're on the bridge. It's real. Can't do that today. It's phenomenal. With a very young Don Rickles making his first film appearance. It's black and white. Get over that and watch it. If you haven't, you probably have. It's phenomenal. The storyline deviates from the novel, apparently. Edward Beach was dissatisfied and unhappy with that, but hey, welcome to Hollywood, baby. This happens all the time. They buy the rights, and they loosely base it on what the property they're buying. But then the script writers get in there and they freshen it up. The director says, more action, more action. We need more drama. So it's almost always going to deviate from the book. That's just the way Hollywood operates. And I don't know if there's any, obviously I haven't read the books. I don't know if there's any big issue with that or not, but you can't go around watching this. It's phenomenal. So that's it for today. Sub-drivers. Man, that was good stuff. I am Ralph Waldo Christie down here in Australia. My magnetic exploder works just fine. I don't want anybody's talking about. We're going to stick with it no matter what. Until next time, happy reading.